So in this video, I'm going to be a little Jekyll and Hyde because I still can't recommend the Toyota Tundra, even the 2026s, after reading the latest details in the recall report from Toyota. So I'm going to show you the timeline and then show you the details that they put in this new recall report and just give you my thoughts on it. It's not great, in my opinion. So let's dive in. So I created this nice little graph because I think it's good for people to understand the timeline of the V35A engine. So let's start here in pre-2024. So you have the V35A launch in the Toyota Tundra. That's really when a lot of the failures started happening. Maybe a year into production of that, you started seeing them pop up in forums and other things. But it's important to note that the Lexus variant of that 9 years ago, they had failure reports from this same engine. It was modified to put in the Tundra, but it's essentially the same engine. And they had number one main bearing failures. So let's just look back 9 years of engine failures in this really is what we're looking at, not just with the Tundra. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. Early 2024, the first recall was put out, 24V381. That was the first big recall from Toyota and everybody was freaking out. Then moving on to late 2024, recall number 2. We know that it was up to a couple 100,000 at this point. The same story, swarf into the engine, and this is what they believe to be the issue. Now, moving on to this latest recall, the details. I'll show you the document and the bench testing that they did, but this to me is the most telling piece of this. To be clear, this latest recall, they are saying does not include engines that have the new improved number one main bearing. So if you have an improved main bearing, meaning after August 5th, 2024 production date, they're claiming that these engines should be okay. Now, we all know that that's not the case, because we've seen 2025s and one 2026 drop off. But just the 2025 failures alone would tell me that this is not true. The number one main bearing upgrades are not necessarily solving this issue. If you had a brand new improved main bearing design and that's what you were relying on to handle this load, would you really trust that in a modern vehicle to hit 2, 3, 500,000 miles like what Toyotas were used to? No, you wouldn't trust that. So particularly in early 24 and through 2024 and through August 5th of 2024, there was a transition period. And in this recall report, it was very interesting. They tested cam housing clearance adjustments, timing chain load and interactions with the main bearings. It sounds to me like they were not convinced that it was debris only. They thought it was load related and tolerance related. I think that's the biggest red flag in this latest report. And then you move into this latest recall that just came out, 43,566 2024 Tundras are affected. They say the same thing. It's engine debris, and debris can contaminate number one bearing and cause failure. And they're saying that it only includes February 7th through August 5th of 2024 Tundra. So any 2024 Tundra manufactured after that date, you are out of luck. If you have this problem, a main bearing failure, which you might, you're going to be under a short block rebuild, anything after that date. After August 5th, they are claiming that the number one main bearing was implemented, this new bearing that can handle all sorts of debris. Maybe they just gave up on getting the debris out of there. Yeah, right. So this is the chronology from Toyota on what they actually did in the timeline. So they are saying when filing their second recall here, that was in November of 2025, Toyota continued to investigate certain vehicles with the V35A engine produced in Alabama and the improved manufacturing process and other changes built after those involved in that recall. So Toyota investigated the effects of one of these changes, the cam housing clearance changes on bearing pressure, and together with the supplier also studied the progression of main bearing wear from engines in the field. So they took non-failed engines and failed engines and they compared them and did tests on the bearings. Now this to me is the most telling or concerning part. In the study of the cam housing clearance change in February of 2026, it was found that there was a stack up of bearing pressure based on variables that include timing chain tension and engine loading scenarios. But this pressure stack up could not differentiate those engines produced during the period under the study from the engines that were previously recalled. So to me, the fact that they are chasing these things and they are concerned about maybe tolerance differentiation and stack up of tolerance differences, all the way down to the timing chain tension and the cam housing clearance. That to me tells me that they are chasing a ghost, and they are not sure and they are not convinced that this is a manufacturing debris issue. This has been speculated, obviously, by you guys and everybody else on the internet that, gosh, this is not a debris issue at this point. Going back 9 years to the Lexus products that were built in Japan, the engines are built in Japan, and then these are built in Alabama, and they're claiming it's manufacturing debris in both cases. Now, I will tell you a silver lining at the end of this video, but this to me just doesn't give me warm fuzzies that they truly believe this problem is fixed. They're just kind of throwing money at it and saying, well, let's just put in a stronger number one main bearing, and that will get people further down the road. And when they did some bench testing in this latest recall study, they said in early May 2026, Toyota and the supplier completed the engine collection, teardown, and analysis of the number one main bearings in the field. They basically found that the bearings in the 2024s were failing with the same level of debris that the previous recalled engines were. So that's either admitting that you did nothing to remove the swarf or the manufacturing debris in the previous two recalls, which is probably not true. It's the same exact pattern. So the same failure mode, the same pattern on the number one main bearing, and which, by the way, Eric brought this up in his engine teardown. Why does it only affect the number one main bearing? Wouldn't it affect all of them? Wouldn't we see a random pattern, maybe the rear bearings or the middle bearings failing? It's always the number one main bearing. They're researching this excessive load on that number one main bearing, and I think this is partially a design issue as well. Now, putting this into perspective, compared to General Motors 6.2 issues, Toyota had 360 warranty claims on the engines in these 2024s. Nowhere near what we see with the GM failures, but they also haven't sold as many of these engines, the V35A and the Tundras. Obviously, they don't sell as many Tundras as GM sells Yukons, Tahoes, and all the other variants of those. They sell millions of those vehicles in GM. Toyota sells a couple 100,000 a year. This is not like Toyota. This is the company that people buy a vehicle and they buy it to drive it forever. The majority of people that want Toyotas, especially used Toyotas, they're buying them because they trust them beyond 100, 200,000 miles. They feel the same. That's how they used to be. The old 5.7 platform, you could go pick one up with 150, 200,000 miles. If it's maintained properly, it felt just like it did at 40,000 miles. That being said, if you look at this on my website, thecarguyonline.com, we do see engine failures. So Toyota's saying in their documentation that, hey, anything with this new improved number one bearing, you won't have this problem. We see different in the NHTSA reports. So this is a complete engine failure that came in on January 20th, 2026. This is a 2025 model Tundra. So any of the 2025s that you see as failed. Now, most of these are throttle lag issues that you see, and they're located under the engine category. So they're not all failures, but we've seen plenty of 2025s fail more than you would expect. You do see one here, November 28th, 2025, bearing failed at highway speeds. So there are some engine failures in NHTSA, and anytime you see a failure in here, you can sort of extrapolate that out because most people don't report their failures. They just go to the dealership, get it fixed, and move on with life. That's just the unfortunate truth. So a lot of them don't get reported to NHTSA. But that being said, the 2026s, we haven't seen any NHTSA reports. We have seen, on my channel, I interviewed someone that had a 26 and he had the same problem. He said he had main bearing failure. The truck was at the dealership and he ended up getting a Tacoma. I truly believe this is where the Jekyll and Hyde thing comes in. I see a lot fewer failures, but we're talking they're early in their life. So a 2025 or a 2026 doesn't have a lot of miles on it yet. But I still see 2022s, 2023s, 2024s. Some of these guys have 200,000 miles on them and they actually haven't got the recalled engine yet. It's really one of those issues where I do think it was swarf in the engine. I do think that if someone was running a 5W30 oil in these engines, they might have better luck, especially given what Toyota said with their study on the cam clearances and the timing chain tension and the excess pressure on the number one main bearing. If I owned a Tundra, I'd probably be running 5W30 oil. I get that people are like, no, you run what the manufacturer says. I don't think so. I think with these twin turbo high stress engines, especially on a V6, you have fewer main bearings to deal with the load. I've talked about this in the past, and this is one of the reasons I personally bought the Hurricane over the Tundra, was because an inline six has a lot more bearing surface to spread the load. And I believe that's important when you're pushing 400 to 500 horsepower out of these little tiny 3 to 3.5 liter engines. I think you need more bearing surface to distribute that load. That's why V8s used to be, they were underpowered for the amount of bearing surface they had. That's just my personal opinion. I want an engine that has almost no failures reported. For me, I'm very risk averse. Some people aren't. Some people they're totally fine with the numbers they see from the Tundra. So you guys out there that say it's really not that many failing now, it's not compared to GM. But this is a lot compared to, say, the Ram Hurricane engine. You don't see the Hurricanes having this problem. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? They're using the same weight oil. 0W20 in both systems. I'm going to come out with a video here shortly. I've got my last 0W20 test. I'm going to get the dealer oil changed here shortly just to get that on the Carfax. And I might switch to 5W30 in my Hurricane and show you guys the results of that just to see if I have better results with wear metals. I personally wouldn't buy the Tundra engine. I'm a very risk averse person. You can buy it if you want to. I don't trust it. Given this latest recall report you see here, and especially what you see in the transition period, when they're looking at cam housing clearances, timing chain, load, that does not give me faith that Toyota is 100% certain that it's all swarf. I do think part of it was swarf. You see fewer failing now, but this is so long in the making. I hope this helps you out. I'm sorry if you have one of these trucks and you thought the issue was resolved and it's not. That's a bummer. You're probably going to have to eat the cost. The good news is Toyotas still sell for a lot on the used market. Despite these problems, their resale value hasn't been hit as hard as it probably should. So there's that. Thanks for watching. Till next time.